There we go.
Hello
Recording in
and
progress.
welcome to hello and welcome to the Mobile Accessible Games interview series. My name is Aaron Spelker. Mobile Accessible Games is a group that is dedicated to all things about mobile accessible gaming, and through our interview series, we interview game developers as well as mobile accessible gaming influencers. And this week we have a game developer in Oriol Gomez, a creator of several different types of games across several different genres. And Oriol, welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here talking to you, and uh, I'm glad that you decided to interview me. It's an honor for me to you know be interviewed by you.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean,
So
yeah, our interview series, we love talking to game developers who, kind of focus on gaming accessibility to, create these games that are accessible to the blind and visually impaired. And what's really kind of unique and special about you is you're a blind individual. So you're a blind person creating these games that, work for the blind and visually impaired. And as well, they're perfectly suitable games for those who are sighted who can enjoy them as well. So, I'm really kind of excited to, learn about your perspective and your path, to become a game developer. So kind of, let's start there. I mean, why don't you just tell us, a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're located, maybe how you got into game development.
all right. So currently, I'm 30 years old. I'm from Spain, um, and my gaming development career is a bit interesting because I started when I was really little. I guess I started making software when I was I don't know, maybe I was 15 or so. I didn't start making games at that time, but I did start making small programs and stuff. I was very interested in programming when I was in school. And so that's how I started getting interested in programming. I also learned about web development and stuff. So it wasn't until let's say when I was about 20 or so that I made my first games. They were Windows games, like very basic stuff, um, using especially programming language, especially tailored for audio game development. It was very not very exciting stuff, but it wasn't until the pandemic that I started actually learning how to make games for mobile platforms like iOS.
Mhm.
And it was very nice because I didn't have a job at that time, so I wanted to making games for iOS was something I wanted to do for a while. And I always thought, okay, I need to get this started, and I don't know how to start with it. But I decided to pick up some coding books for iOS, like for Swift,
Mhm.
and actually started, learning how to make games. I even read some tutorials and stuff, and started getting into things, and especially because I'd gotten my first job as a web developer in 2020, so I kind of had the idea, but I didn't have any iOS experience yet. So that's how it all started. In September of 2020, I had my first game out, my first iOS game out.
Oh,
So,
excellent. So let's
yep.
let's go back towards the beginning. So,
Mm-hmm.
are you, so you're talking, started working on creating some games when you're 15. Have you been blind all your
Mm-hmm.
life?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about, how you learned to do coding, 15 years old. Is it, I struggle. I've lost my vision 3 years ago. So I spent most of
Okay.
my life as a sighted person. So like my head is very much like, okay, so, technically you can understand the writing the code, but how does that translate into what someone sees on a screen? Particularly if you're, and your games are perfectly playable by those who are sighted as well. How do you ensure that the visual presentation of what you're creating actually is working out when that's an experience you really haven't had as an individual?
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, the first games I ever made, like when I was 15, of course, they none of them had visuals, right? They
Mhm.
were all audio based. They had sounds. They had a little window the user could go to, and you had your audio menus, your audio cues, stereo fields, so you knew always where your character was or whatever. None of these had visuals. These iOS games that I've made recently, they do have visuals. I do have people, helping me out with this. I have a couple of beta testers who are sighted, so they kind of know what hey, this thing doesn't look right, or you need to clip this button, or you need to make it more beautiful, or whatever.
This is
Um,
fascinating because usually you have like, blind beta testers working on accessibility. You have sighted beta testers working on sighted
yeah,
accessibility. That's that's different.
yeah, it is.
Um,
Because yeah, like here's the thing, right? I mean, you have perfect voiceover accessibility, and then when you want to implement, inclusiveness, as in, make your game playable to people without disabilities, you have to rely on someone like, hey, make this button bigger, or
right. Well, that is fascinating. Um, so when you're 15 and you're learning code,
hmm.
again, like, how did that interest even come up? I mean, what was your first exposure to coding? Was it something just organic that you thought maybe I want to do this, or did someone expose it to you, or did you have somebody that was doing it that you said, oh, maybe I can do that? Like, how did you get into considering, writing code and creating some sort of games?
I guess I started, like, I don't really remember how it really came, but I guess I started playing some of the other games that blind people had made or whatever, and I thought, hey, why can't I do the same thing, right? And yeah, that's how I started learning, like, because the first thing I ever coded was not even a game. One of the first things that I made was some website and scripts for my internet radio that I had at the time, which was like a song requester, so people could say, "Hey, can you play this song on YouTube, whatever?"
Right.
And it would go to a database, and it was pretty slick. It was pretty nice. But yeah, the first things that I ever made weren't even games, so that's
Was that
funny.
like was that like a pirate radio that you were doing, or was that sanctioned?
Uh, sort of. One
Uh,
of those online streams that people have, and hey, play this song. Can you make this prank call to this friend of mine, or
okay.
yeah.
Uh, so, school-wise, when you were, doing school as a young person, um,
Mm.
was that like a school for the blind? Did you go to regular, school that all other kids went to, and how did you navigate your education?
Yeah, I went to a regular school. I didn't have a blind education. I didn't have blindness based education. Most people here in Spain don't. I know some other countries do have these blindness based educational systems.
Mhm.
Not. I mean, some people here do go to blind schools, but most of us don't. So, yep.
What,
Um,
was that severely difficult, trying to fit into a, cited educational system as a blind person, or were they pretty accommodating?
no, it was, I wouldn't say it was difficult. I would say the fit in part was a bit different because I was a typical nerd. I did have a couple of nerd friends, but you know, it was not like, oh, I'm the popular kid. No, no way. No. But it was still pretty, it was okay for me since I didn't really want to be popular anyway, so I didn't really care.
Were, did you have other blind kids, as, there's somebody who's like me who's going to the school, or were you kind of like the only blind person, having this experience at the time that you were going to school?
Yeah, not in my school, but I did have other blind friends, sure. Yep. Like, close in the same city or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, getting back to the games, 15, you start creating some games, web-based games. It's interesting. I have not played those games, but um,
Hmm.
I've kind of mentioned that I'm going to be interviewing you, and some people who've been blind quite a while have mentioned to me like, oh, I love those games. I know some of the work that he's done. So it seems like
Right.
you got some traction on those games that you created. Maybe just tell us a little bit more about those. What
All right.
again? I get the sense that they were popular. So I mean, if you could tell me, how maybe they caught interest in the community.
Okay.
Just any kind of information about that early work that you did.
Okay. So the first game I ever made was called Death on the Road, which was kind of a there was an old game called the Curb Game, which was made by audiogames.net, and this one did have pictures. Mine didn't. It was kind of similar to that game. It did have a lot of cars, a lot of different cars with music in them, and the idea of the game was to, you were walking down a road, and your goal was not to get hit by any car. That was the first game I ever made. It was very, very simple. It did have a lot of bugs, as in, when your game was over, you couldn't, like, it would freeze, you had to quit the game and stuff. It did have a lot of errors, right? But I did improve that game in the end. It had more features, it had more stuff. So
And that's
yeah.
all web-based, like web browser-based type of game.
No, those were made in BGT, which was a tool specifically made to make audio games, which was how I got into real audio game making. But I did no
But
wait, Death on the Road. Sorry.
I was going to say, how do people play you're playing that on your PC, right?
Yep.
That's
Yep. But yeah, then I made another big project called BeatStar. That one's still around, and now it is web based, so it can be played on a Mac as well. And BeatStar is all about, it has it has different music playing, and you have to. It's kind of like Bop It, if you know what I'm talking about. It sort of tells you one instruction, you have to press that key in a short while, keeping the rhythm of the music, kind of like Guitar Hero stuff.
right. Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that game became very, very, very popular. People started creating packs for it. There are like 500 packs now, with different music, different
Oh,
levels,
wow.
different sounds.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, and I made maybe like 5% of them. So yeah, I mean, very, very popular game.
And so if
What
you're gonna
else?
go out and play that game, where do you go to play that?
My site, oriolgomez.com.
Okay.
That's where you get it.
All right.
And then what else? I made another game called Danger on the Wheel, which is where you drive around, you knock down cones. It was a very, very basic arcade game, but it was also very fun, which is also BGT based. But I did want to make the web version, but I never made it yet. What else did I make? Made a ton of stuff actually.
And
um,
all of those, those various different games, because I noticed this about your iPhone app games that you've done as well,
mhm.
is, you're switching around genres. I mean, you're not sticking like
Yep.
I make music games or I make racing games. I mean, you're trying
Mm.
out some different stuff. Tell me a little bit about that exploration. Is it just, you get the itch to be like, can I do this? Or why try out different things, or what drew you to these type of games to
Mm.
create that?
I would say sort of, right? Because basically, like, if we're talking about my iPhone games now, I wanted to make, for example, 2048, which was a very, very popular game, about combining numbers and stuff. This was my first project and actually the hardest to make. And then I thought, why not make something easier? I made Hangman, I made a couple other word games and stuff. When I made this last one called Letterfull, the word Tetris kind of game,
Yeah.
I thought to myself, I was like, okay, this is going to be the last word game I'm going to make in a while. I want to make something different. So hopefully my next project will be something different. But no, I mean, I guess, yeah, it was a thing about, oh, can I do this? And oh, this is going to be easier, or I'm getting used to, iOS development. I'm going to make something that is not overly complicated. But yeah, next thing I want to make, I don't know what it will be yet, but it's not going to be a word game.
Okay. I
Hmm.
just recently played Letterful, and it's very anxiety inducing. It moves pretty quick, and I'm
Yep.
constantly trying to keep up with it. Prevent the all the letters from filling the grid and ending my game. So,
Yeah.
the first time, I don't know if everybody has this experience, but I mean, the first time was just embarrassingly bad how poorly I did. But, kind of as you play, you get a little bit better at it of moving quicker
Yep.
and recognizing words. I think there probably is a little bit of an advantage if you're sighted, because you can kind of take in all 20 letters, at one time and quickly see something,
Mm,
as opposed to, I think it's a little bit more, or has a memory component in it, as a blind person, because you
yeah.
kind of try to remember what letters already have dropped and which ones you've used, so what's still left as you go back to
Hmm.
type in your next word. But that's a fun game. I've played your accessible 2048, your accessible
Oh yeah.
Hangman. Um, I've played both of those. I feel like I played one other one of yours, because I thought I played three, and then Letterfull. But I think Letterfull I like the best of all of
Okay.
those.
Cool.
Again, really, really challenging,
Mm.
and fun. Um, did you ever think about, like adding a difficulty level in Letterfull so that, you could go on an easy mode that maybe the letters drop a little bit slower?
I don't know. I'm actually making a settings screen for the next version, so maybe this will be a thing. It should be, right?
Yeah, I mean, I like the idea. Is you put in an easy mode where the letters drop a little slowly, and then
Mm,
you master that and you get really good at that. Then you go up and you're like, all right, let me play on normal, and then you're not
right.
very good. And when you eventually get good at normal, then you go to hard, where they're dropping so fast that you can't possibly keep
Ooh.
up. I like that idea, because again, I was just so embarrassed my first few playthroughs of how poorly I did.
Right.
Um, so, again, the those apps, as you kind of mentioned, I mean, you have like an anagram game, you have this Letterfull, word
Yep.
Tetris type of game, you
Hmm.
have accessible 2048, which,
Hmm.
call it a math puzzle game, to some degree, a classic Hangman. So there's a lot of different genres that you're kind of, covering in those. Is that exciting to just try to tackle something new and figure it out?
Yeah, like okay, I made Hangman and then I made anagrams. I wanted anagrams to be the musical experience of a word game, right? Because if you played the anagrams game called Palabra Cadabra, which is actually a fun Spanish rhyme that many people, well, it's not a rhyme. It's like when you cast a magic spell in Spanish, you go abracadabra, right? So palabra means word.
Okay.
So yeah, and that's why the wizard logo when you start up the game. So
Gotcha.
and yeah, I wanted this to be the musical experience of a word game, right? Because when you're doing the anagrams, it goes tick 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 tick. The music kind of gets more intense as you approach your high score or whatever.
Right.
And so I wanted to be, this the musical experience. So I've kind of been tackling different things in different genres. So when this anagrams game came out, I was talking to a friend of mine, and we were like, why not make something similar, but with random letters popping up? And then I thought, hey, yeah, I mean, like Tetris, right? So yeah, that's how that's usually how new ideas come,
Right.
you
Gotcha.
know. Mm-hmm.
You know, let's take Hangman, a relatively simple
Mm-hmm.
concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you structurally on the back end? You have some word, um,
Mm-hmm.
or actually no, let me pick a different one. Let me pick letterful, because you have a bunch of letters drop, and a person tries to combine those letters and create a word, right?
Yep.
And then you check that word on whether that word exists against whichever dictionary you're using, whether it be English, Spanish, Italian, etc., with the different
That's it.
ones that you have. Um, but how do you, like, is there a English dictionary add-in or something that you get to hit against? Like, how do you actually do that part of it? Because I mean, you're
Nah.
not you're not typing every word in the dictionary in there. You must be leveraging something that you're checking that word against, and what is that something, and how does that kind of mechanically work?
Right. There's two parts to this. For Hangman, there is a word list, right? Because it has
Right.
to pick the word from
Yeah.
somewhere,
Right. That's why I
right?
changed. Yeah, that's why I changed from that one because you probably do create a list for that one, and that's probably a little
Yep.
easier. Um,
But for Letterfull and the anagrams game, Palabra Cadabra, it's a bit um, smarter than that. What it does, it gets the iPhone's autocorrect dictionary, and if the word is right, then the word is right. You know.
oh, I see. Okay.
So that's how it does it.
Oh, interesting.
Autocorrect dictionary for the language that you're playing on. So it's kind of smart but
That's
silly in the way that
it's kind of genius. Um,
yeah.
Now, did you come up with that idea on your own, or did someone say, "Oh, this is how you do it"? Here's the trick to,
It
how
was on
to.
one of the books that I read, actually. But yeah, I mean, it's a very smart idea. Yes, it wasn't one of the Swift books that I read for learning how to code in Swift.
So,
Um,
go back to that. You're reading Swift books. Is
hmm.
that accessible enough in, how that's presented to you in, JAWS or NVDA or however you're reading it? I don't know what methodology you're using to kind of read the Swift, guidebook, if you will. Or was there difficult? Was there problems where they're presenting you something and it's not really it's an image or it's not reading right because of however it's configured in the book? Was that kind of an easy blind experience to read through
Hmm.
that material?
Well, the books that I use were very accessible, and I'm going to be like it's free publicity here, but I use that Hacking with Swift books, which are very accessible, and they give you the EPUB and HTML and PDF, so you can kind of choose.
Right.
And yeah, they I don't know if they have pictures or not, but if they do,
Didn't hinder you.
they don't interfere. Like the code is not picture based, so you can follow along easily what you're doing.
Now you really picked up those books, what would you say, when the pandemic started? So like around 2019, 2020, that's when you're
Yep.
picking up the Swift book. So how long, from picking up the book and starting to read through it to putting out your first game, which was accessible
Mm.
2048, how long is that process?
Not very long. Maybe I took in a lot of material before actually starting with the game, maybe 3 or 4 months. But for example, Hangman was done in 2 to 3 weeks. It was very easy,
Okay.
to get started with it because I already knew what I wanted to do. So yeah,
Do you
yeah.
find
I'd say when I say sorry, when I say 2 to 3 weeks, it took a lot longer than that, but that's only because most days I just stalled. I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do it today. I'm gonna continue working on my game today, and then I don't. So I'd say around 2 to 3 weeks.
working weeks?
Yep.
Yeah. So do you think it was a smart idea, for you know, having people find you, accessible 2048. It's kind of a known franchise. You threw the word accessible in there. Does that
Yeah.
does that kind of, people who are looking for 2048 can find it. People who are looking for something that's accessible can find it. Do you think that was, was that intentional as a smart way? I'll start with an intellectual property that already kind of exists, get my name out
Mm.
there, recreate what they have, before I start trying to
Yeah.
do something on my own.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I throw in the word accessible, especially in the classic games like Hangman, or I mean, if you notice that Palabra Cadabra or Letterfull don't have the accessible word in them, but that's because I guess the names are pretty unique. But I needed to throw the word accessible out, and like I needed to throw it out there because otherwise, there are probably a million 2048 games in the App Store, and none of
Right.
them are accessible except for this
Correct.
one. So,
Yeah.
yep.
And do when you throw out accessible 2048 up onto the App Store, I mean, is it, you know, day one, are you getting downloads? Does it take a while to build some momentum? How
Yeah, yeah. I'd say day one. Because I'd put it out there, mailing lists, Apple lists, groups like Facebook groups. I even have a little text file called marketing checklist, right?
yeah,
And I,
all the
I
places
I
you're supposed to
create a
post.
copy of that. Yeah, I create a copy of that file every time I make a new game. and I tick off everything I've already done, like, post to WhatsApp groups, post to
Right, right. No, it's smart. I mean,
so
that's one of those things that you think at the start, probably the first time you're creating 2048, you're like, I create a game, I'm a game developer, but you don't realize you have to be the game's marketer as well,
yeah,
and promoter
exactly.
and all the other stuff that comes on the back end of
Mm,
getting the word out there.
hmm
That's so it's 2,500 games a day hit the app store.
Right.
So getting
But
yours to show
oops.
up, and be searched by somebody. And I think it's really smart. I
Mm,
think throwing the accessible in there and 2048, are
mm,
things people will look for. So, and
yep.
even
But
blind people will be like, oh, is there a 2048 accessible game? And you search 2048 and right there,
right.
oh, that's the one. Okay, great. Download it.
And here's the thing, right? When I'd say marketing is easier when you're, blind, working for the blind. Well, working. I mean, making stuff for the blind, because you know where to look or where to post, right? I
Sure.
mean, if you're a sighted developer wanting hits, you probably don't know where to start. Like, do I post this on Reddit? Am I going to get my post banned? Is
Right.
it too promoting?
Right.
But
Right.
when you're blind, you know where to post. Like, there's this mailing list, there's Apple list, you're probably not gonna get as many downloads as some sighted developer in the end making games for, like, very, exciting platformers or whatever. But
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, maybe. I mean, if you hit it, a viral and really get attention, or
yeah,
sure, you're going to. But again, to your point, to get your game heard above the noise of 2,500 games being released every day,
right.
you're posting to blind groups and saying, "Hey, there's an accessible
Mm-hmm.
2048." I think that immediately garners some attention from some people, being like, "Oh,
Exactly.
I always wanted to play that game. Let me go download that." I think that gets
Yep.
you some attention right away. And now, when you put out accessible 2048 and Hangman and Letterfull, and you have a series of games that are accessible, playable, fun, I think you now instantly get the attention of the blind community of, oh, what's Oriol's next game? I'm sure it's
Yep.
going to be
That's the
accessible.
thing.
Let me give that a
Mm-hmm.
try. Um, so do you have a for your next game, or maybe not even your next, but do you have what is your magnum opus? What is the grand game that you one day want to create? That might take you years to complete. Do you have that game in your head?
I don't have a game in my head that will take years to complete. I do have a game in mind, though. Actually, two. One is to have Danger on the Wheel on iOS, because Danger on the Wheel is, the game I told you about, which was about, driving a car and knocking down cones and
Hmm.
stuff.
Yep.
But I
It's always
do
good. There's
want this game.
not too many
I,
racing games for the blind out there, so that's a good niche
Not
to
on the
fill.
phone, no.
Yep.
I do want this game out because, I can implement both very nice haptic feedback, as in vibrations, and also, play around with the idea that if you don't knock down enough cones, your car will stop because it won't speed up enough for, play around with that stuff.
Hmm.
Uh, and also that, yeah, I do have this idea in mind, and then I have another idea in mind, which is to create an app of mini games. Mini games, as in, simple games you can play while you're on the train or whatever.
Right.
But I'm not talking about work games this time. I'm talking about something like, I don't know, um, maybe there's a bell and you need to tap the screen 3 times, and then you get your reaction time or whatever,
Hmm.
small
So
things like that.
so kind of like uh, have you played the game Dusk?
Yeah,
Yes.
something like that, but a bit more exciting than,
Okay.
those Dust games. Maybe, yeah, maybe 4 or 5 games on a single app. I don't know. We'll see.
So you're again kind of your pedigree of game development. You fool around a little bit when you're 15,
Hmm.
doing it on your own, obviously self-taught. Um, you said you got a job in some sort of web development. So did you go on to, secondary school to university and study computer science, or, like how did after you were 15, what did you do to kind of further your knowledge about, computer programming?
Okay, so after I finished high school, when I was what, 18, I guess. I did go to university. I didn't study programming though, not yet. I studied languages, German, English, Spanish, and right after that, I already knew how to code a little bit. So I learned. I did a not a computer science degree. I don't know how to call it in English. I guess it's kind of like a 2-year coding program, which is certified.
Okay.
Yep. So 2 years of studying programming to actually get a job in it. So, yep, that's what I did.
Where did you go to university?
Here in Barcelona.
In Barcelona. Um,
Yep.
and again, same sort of thing. You know, that's obviously not a university for the blind. So, I mean, how was that kind of experience as a blind person going to university, in kind of a sighted educational world?
Oh, I liked it. It was the first time I could live alone, like on my own. And yeah, the first year was probably, lack of experience in the kitchen and stuff,
Hmm.
but it was very fun. And then in my third year, I did go to Germany. That was a bit tougher because I also had to do the washing, the laundry.
Right.
But no, yeah, it was very fun, independence wise. I did make a lot of friends, some of which I still keep. Not all though. I mean,
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, it was pretty fun. I did become less shy when I started university because, like I told you, during school I was, typical nerd. So that was good.
Yeah, that's actually, I mean, kind of when you go up to university, it kind of expands so much that there's always, no matter what type of person you are, there's probably somebody else that has the same interests as you. You just got to find them. You know what I mean? Uh, high school is such a smaller microcosm, that you might not find your
Yep.
people, during high school. Was university like, near Las Ramblas and, kind of that all touristy area, or was it further in the burbs?
No, it was further. There's well, it was not exactly in Barcelona. It was like 35 minutes away.
Okay.
So you did kind of have to, take the train and go there. It was kind of in the mountain, but it was fun. I mean, you could take the train and you could be in Barcelona in about half an hour, so
Oh,
it
that's
was
great.
great. Mm.
So obviously now you're working on apps on for the iPhone. You're using Swift. You're self-teaching yourself on those on accessible ebooks for Swift.
Mm.
I have over my time met other blind people who are interested in doing game development and are working on
Mm-hmm.
game development, and again trying to self-teach themselves. What advice would you give those people about, how you kind of get to a spot where you're actually releasing, different types of games, or and what things were difficult that, maybe you could give some advice of, this is how you get around, this struggle I had.
Okay, this is an interesting question, and hopefully I won't get too technical. Um, all I will say is that go for it first. That's the first thing. Go for it, and start learning and doing stuff that you want to do. But now here's where I don't want to get too technical. When I started my current job as a developer, nothing game related, right?
Mhm.
But I did learn the importance of keeping your code clean, as in don't mess around with bad coding practices and stuff because when you're a newbie you don't know what you're doing. So
Right.
right, so that's the thing. Try to learn things like clean code, the principles like good practices, testing, all that stuff that sounds boring but it's necessary. So yeah, I mean, and I say this because it can be very tempting to code around and mess around with some product that will be full of bugs like I did. For example, BeatStar still has a lot of bugs
Right.
because it was one of the first games that I made, and it's full of files that are over 1,000 lines long, and this is not clean at all. So go for it, but follow good practices always and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and I imagine too, it's I've done a little bit before I lost my sight. I was dabbling in coding a game for fun, and
Mm-hmm.
same sort of thing. Didn't know what I was doing, so I did a lot of things that were just inefficient, but I didn't know how else to do it. And then kind of later on, learned, oh, I could have done that better. So it just
Right.
seems like, as you said, work on take the time to learn it, to do it clean, go slow at the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
document well what's going on. Because again, when you
Oh
step
yeah.
away from it for a while and you come back and you're like, what was I doing 6 months ago? I don't even understand
Yeah, 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 yeah.
what this code is supposed to be accomplishing. So, writing in those comments, to just, give yourself a
Right.
what is this attempting to do?
Yep.
All those things are, I think, really, really, really vital. For resources, what you say was hacking for Swift. What was the name of the book that you said?
Hanging
That's
with Swift.
hacking with Swift. So that's a good resource that you found.
Mm-hmm.
Any, um, you know, YouTube tutorials or other, resource
Uh,
information that you thought was useful?
I don't like YouTube tutorials because usually those tutorials just put the
Very
code on the
visual.
screen,
Right, right.
right?
Yep.
But yeah, there are a few Udemy courses that are good. I haven't. Wait, actually, there is one for Swift. Maybe I can give you a link later. But yeah, I use Udemy mostly for other kinds of programming, or learning how to test or how to do clean code, or and some of those courses do have they are visual, but they do have the code resources that you can download. So that's the good part. If you're blind, you can still follow along mostly.
Let me
Yeah.
ask you this question, and it might be a silly question, but please don't judge me. Um, when you're writing code, right? If you're writing the same code, uh, you know, if this, then that type of code,
Mm-hmm.
is that the same in English as in Spanish, or is all coding done in English just to keep it universal around the globe, you know, or is there a Spanish, if then, using the Spanish words for if and then, to
Uh,
write the code?
Actually, no. Coding is mostly in English. You can of course have your variables in whatever language you want. I always keep them in English,
Okay.
because it makes for more universal stuff. You don't get your languages mixed in. Um, you do have language packs for Xcode and Visual Studio Code, but most of us don't use them. You just code in English everything, especially if you know the language, right? Because if you speak English, then it's not going to be a problem. But of course, if you don't speak the language, you might want to do your coding in whatever language you want.
Right. Um,
But yeah, those if and stuff, no, they can't be translated because, for example, Swift or whatever, it parses the word if, and it won't parse something in another language. So yep, you have to do that in English.
um, so have you explored, I mean, is Swift, the program that you think is best to use? I know some people use like Unity. Have you thought about any other programs, or do you find just Swift is the most accessible and useful for the type of things that you're creating?
Okay, so I use Swift for a couple of reasons. The first one being that Unity is not accessible.
Right.
Otherwise, maybe I would use it. But the other reason I use Swift over something else is because you get Swift UI, which make lets you have native user interface elements, all done by code. So you can make an interface visually beautiful as well using only code. So it's very easy for blind people. But of course, it's not the only option. You can have, of course, also something like React Native with CSS and whatever. But I thought Swift UI was great to learn. It's true that in this way I don't get my games for Android, but you know, um, maybe in the future there will be some Android games. I don't know.
We were talking about this a little earlier of, you know, there's the writing the code, obviously, and there's a lot that kind of comes with that of, figuring out how to, include dictionaries and how to do, whatever the math for 2048 and things like that.
Mm,
But what are the components that, maybe when you first sat down, you didn't really think about? I mean, we kind of already talked, there's a whole marketing component that probably you didn't even think about, but
mm,
is there things like, all right, I never even thought about sound effects, and I had to figure out sound effects or visuals, and I
right.
didn't really think about that, and then I had to pull in, some beta visual testers, to help me. Like, what are the
That's
things
it.
that, yeah, that you didn't consider when you sat down?
Okay, so the first thing I never thought about, and which I should have thought about, was a logo for every app, right?
Mm,
I do have someone who makes those, luckily, and uh, also the music, of course. When you are on the App Store, you can't use, some random sound you found on the internet. You have to use legal stuff and
right,
stuff that belongs to you, or maybe that you purchased.
right.
I
Sound
do
packs
have,
and stuff.
yep, I do have a friend who does the music. I have made some musics myself using Logic, because I did study music as well, but I didn't.
You're like a Renaissance man. Coding,
I,
you're learning every language, you're doing music.
I I didn't go through with music theory until the end, but I guess I'm still okay enough for making simple tracks. And then also I play the guitar, so I mean that's cool. Yeah.
When you buy like a music pack or a sound effects pack,
Mhm.
is that for one game only, or could I buy this pack and I'm going to use the same sounds in the next game I use, so you kind of build up
Well, here's
a
the thing.
line.
You
Okay.
Yeah. Usually when you buy packs, it comes with a lot of sounds, so you don't end up using all of them in the same game.
Mhm.
So you can sort of use the same pack but different sounds in different games. I of course will not use the same music for two games because people will be like, "What are you doing?"
Right.
Yeah.
Um, and then like, for example, if you don't mind sharing, if you've bought a
Hmm.
sound pack, I mean, how much do those cost? Are those $50,
Uh,
$100, $200, or what
it depends.
or equivalent in euro?
Yeah, I guess around, I don't know, $100 for each sound pack. I didn't get a lot of those. Because something like Hangman will have a couple of sounds. I had some friends who also made sounds for it. So I mean, I did buy some sound packs because I do like having sounds for stuff in case I need them, and I've used a lot of these sounds in my PC games, for example. Like Ding on the Wheel, BeatStar, and all that stuff. So yeah, I do buy sound packs. Yeah, and yeah, around $100 maybe. I don't know. It depends on how many sounds it has, and
Right.
uh, yeah.
It's interesting. I talk to a lot of game developers, and when they're talking about accessibility testing, they need to, they try to do some on their own, but they're sighted individuals, so they're like, I'm not really good at
Right.
voiceover, so I kind of farm that out to somebody who has those
Mm-hmm.
expertise skills. Now, you obviously have the expertise in voiceover to self-test your
Mm-hmm.
game, but is it one of those things like, you don't edit your own paper because you can't see your own mistakes? I mean, is that still something that you farm out to other visually impaired people to, give you some honest feedback on, how accessible is this and how's it working? Because you would be a little too close to it yourself to self-judge yourself.
Well, actually, that's an interesting question because I do have blind beta testers, but usually it doesn't come around to testing for accessibility because I can do that myself. But I do need testers for weird glitches like, hey, I just got to level 5 and I only put one word in, stuff like that. But yeah, I do need testers, but not for accessibility stuff mostly. I mean, of course, one might say, hey, why don't you put this in, it's going to make it more accessible, but yeah, I mean
That's so
usually
you're
it's for
more
glitches
traditional,
or
yeah, traditional beta gameplay testers. You know,
mm-hmm.
is this fun? Where are the issues? Okay. Interesting. Like again, you kind of like upside down, beta testing. You have where people you have your blind people not testing for accessibility. It's fascinating. You have them testing for gameplay. It's a very, very different than the experience I've had with other game developers who have accessibility in their games.
Right.
Uh, for adding in accessibility into a game, did you
Mm-hmm.
find that pretty easy to do? Was there challenges or difficulties that make it hard to implement accessibility? I mean, obviously a key thing that you want to do when you're creating your games, but did you find it hard to
Mm-hmm.
do?
I wouldn't say it's hard. especially in Swift UI, it makes it very simple. You can add your accessibility actions and methods. It's not hard. But it's of course, if you haven't used voiceover before, you don't know what to do. Like for example, if you're a sighted developer, doing this for the first time, you're gonna be like, what do I do, right? I mean, so it's good if you have some help from someone who is blind. Like I said, I can do this myself because I know how it works. But if you're doing this for the first time, probably so many things you don't know about, or you would want to do that you don't know how to do. But yeah, Swift UI makes it easy to do. So and also when you're working with websites, or because that's one of the things that I do in my company, right? I do software development and I do accessibility testing of the products that we have.
Mhm.
And there you do have to follow the webcon accessibility guidelines, which are a lot stricter than just making a game. So yeah, I mean, it's a whole entire world, right? It's very interesting how accessibility has evolved and how it is implemented. And I do think that you need blind testers if you want to implement accessibility into a product, because otherwise you're not going to know what to do, or your accessibility conclusions might not be accurate.
Right. Yeah. If you don't have that, visual impairment experience
Mm-hmm.
to really know whether you're solving the need. Um,
Right.
to your point of just how accessibility has grown, I just listened to the game accessibility conference that was Monday and Tuesday, and
Mm-hmm.
I was really encouraged by um, the real focus that is coming out of larger studios now, where they're building out
Right.
accessibility teams and they're thinking about accessibility from the outset of, okay, we're introducing this mechanic, but what about the accessibility component? They're really thinking about that
Right.
stuff as they're creating a game. So I'm really excited for, what comes out over the course of the next, game cycle, the next 3 to 5 years, as games get created with this as the mindset from the outset. I think it's going to be a real
Right.
jump in what is going to be available to us and what's going to be more accessible to the blind and visually impaired community. Um,
Yep.
I used to be a big console gamer as a sighted person. When I went blind, I have found it just too difficult and too much of a struggle. Games are supposed to be fun, not frustrating to me. So I have kind of, for now, walked away from the console. Again, I'm kind of encouraged with the efforts that I see them putting forth. So what games are going to come out in the next 3 to 5 years? But for you,
Mm-hmm.
do you play games on uh, just your phone and your computer, or or all three, computer, consoles, and phone? But where do you play games?
Oh, I do try, like I do play games on my computer as well. I don't have a console right now, but there are some accessible games for consoles as well. I do play on my computer. I have some games from Steam and stuff. Like I don't know. I play a lot of RPGs, and also um, you know,
So what are some,
like
what are fun, accessible games that you play? Just so again, I always like to expose blind people to you know good
okay,
accessible
so
games to play. So what are you playing?
like okay, if we're talking about mainstream games which are accessible,
Mhm.
I do play the newly released Shadows over Silesia, which is kind of an RPG. I also play Sequence Storm. I play Slay the Spire. I play a bunch of games like that. Actually, yeah, those are the games that I play. I've also tried Mortal Kombat 11, a couple of those as well. If we're talking about blind specific games, actually, I don't play a lot of them right now, but I have played most of them, if not, I mean, well, probably not all of them, but maybe most of them.
Now,
So yeah.
those first set that you're mentioning, and you mentioned Steam, are those all from Steam?
Mhm.
Because I found Steam
Yeah,
just as a blind person, just navigating the menus of Steam
it's a
difficult.
nightmare.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How
it's a
do you get around
nightmare.
that? I mean, do you get someone who kind of downloads the game for you and then
No,
put an icon on your desktop, or how do you get around Steam?
There are ways. You have some command line parameters for Steam, which let you log in, and then you can basically download the game from the website. Purchase, and then you can sort of get around to the install game button from Steam itself. It's a bit messed up, but it can be done. There are ways around the inaccessibility in general. So yeah, I mean it can be done. There are ways. Like you don't need to get sighted assistance or anything.
Sorry. That's I'm
Mm.
really hopeful that Steam and Valve will with all the accessibility that is being talked about now, I mean, it seems like it should be a pretty easy thing to add some navigation
Yeah,
accessibility through Steam. Hopefully
but
they'll
they're
get it.
not.
Yeah. Uh,
Until they do.
yeah.
Yeah,
Let's hope. Let's hope.
Mm.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of people just the frustration, like, the game I want to play is accessible. I just can't get to it
Mm.
because of Steam. They're
I mean, you can, right? There are ways around it. Like I said, like there's on the audio games forum, I believe there's a Steam guide, right? So it kind of explains. But yeah, here's the thing. Here's what you said, right? Like you have to be kind of good with computers, otherwise, there's no chance, right? You have to know your screen reader navigation commands well and all that crap.
Yeah, and again, that really cuts down, again, you know, you have to be the top 10% of blind users to, go to utilize Steam. I mean, what about the other 90% who are, just,
Yeah,
not as good or
some
didn't grow up,
crazy stuff.
a little older, they're a little, less, didn't grow up with computers as kids, you know what I mean?
Mm,
So yeah, that's hopefully they'll expand it and make it just easier for everyone and more intuitive. So
right.
I mean, of all the games that you created quite a few different games. Of all the games that you've created, which do you
Mm.
feel is the most successful? In
Uh,
whatever way you measure success, whether that be downloads or financial or just personal. I can't believe I was able to create that game.
I'd say maybe one that we didn't mention yet, which is Choose Your Face, which
Oh
is
yeah,
kind of
that's
a
right.
deal
That's
or
the other
no
one.
deal game.
Yeah, that's the other one.
Yep.
I knew I played another one.
That's a deal or no deal game for iOS. Basically, deal or no deal is where you have 25 boxes, in this case, emojis with different sounds, and there are different coin amounts in each of them. I'd say that was the most fun to make and probably the most accessible because it is self-voicing, like it has my own voice saying the prizes and stuff.
Mhm.
Every box or face has its sound. When you get a really good prize, you get different music, different crowd reactions. It was very fun to make. So yeah, I'd say that one probably.
Excellent.
Letterfull was also very nice to make. I'm still making changes to it, of course, but it was also very nice to get done. Kind of fast paced, kind of nice.
Yeah, that's a fun one. I encourage if you like
Mm,
word puzzle games, I recommend that one
yep.
to people. Well, Oriol, I really appreciate you, taking the time, not only to speak to us, but just taking the time to create games that are accessible, for the blind community, kind of giving back.
Hmm.
And I'm also really excited by, that you're not just creating blind games for blind people, you are creating games for all
Right.
people, which are also usable and accessible for the blind community. So I think that's just
Hmm.
a great story to tell, and I really appreciate the efforts that you've put forth to create those. And again, I've played a good swath of your games. Palabra Cadabra, it's hard to say. Palabra Cadabra, right?
Palabra Cadabra.
Yeah, there you go. You say it better than I. It's a
A lot
tongue
of
twister.
people. A lot of people say that. Sorry. A lot of people think this game should have had a different name.
No, I
I
like it.
don't.
I like it.
I disagree because
No, I like
yeah,
it.
I disagree because if you know the expression abracadabra in
Yeah,
English, I think
yeah,
it's also valid, right? So
right.
in Spanish, it's written with a B, and palabra, which means word, is also with a B. I know it's a bit confusing, but I like it. So
No, I like it. I think it has a fun ring to it. It's just hard for me to say. A tongue twister. Uh, So, again, thank you very much. That'll be on my list to play, and I look forward to the future games. So always feel free to come out to the Facebook group, the Mobile Accessible Games Facebook group, and share any of your
right.
new content or updates on any of your games. Again, I will put in the description
Cool.
for this video all the links that you share for people to reach out to you and your website
Yay.
and get to all of your content. And don't be a stranger. We'd love to hear more about what you're doing.
Right. I sent you an email earlier with my website. I don't know what other links to share with you because all of it is on my website. You can probably find my YouTube there or
Okay, that's perfect.
whatever you need. My Twitter is also there or Discord. Yeah,
Excellent.
I think everything is there.
Perfect. That'll be great. Again, thank you so much. It was great speaking to you.
Yeah, you too. Thank you so much for for this opportunity, and I look forward to hearing what comes out of this. It's very fun to hang around and talk about this. So thanks.
Great. Thank you.